You ever find yourself singing along with a song when you wonder, what did that mean? You know, there are some weird songs out there that don't really make a lot of sense. Example, any Ed Sheeran fans? Do you know this song? Listen to this lyric from his song, I'm a Mess.
Easy, baby, maybe I'm alive. Before tonight, I want to fall in love. Put your faith in my stomach.
What does that mean? I mean, if I were to put my faith in my stomach, I'd be eating French fries and milkshakes every day. Odd. Or maybe you're thinking, yeah, you know, kids nowadays, they don't make songs the way they used to. Well, can you really try and defend the Beatles song, Walrus? Hear a sample of this one.
Semolina Pilchard, climbing up the Eiffel Tower. Elementary penguins singing Hare Krishna. Man, he should have seen them kicking Edgar Allan Poe. I am the Eggman. They are the Eggmen. I am the walrus.
Huh? You know, that song was written in the era when there were 5 Beatles. It was John, Paul, Ringo, George, and LSD. That's actually true. John Lennon admitted that in an interview. He said, yeah, we wrote Walrus one weekend on an acid trip. And that explains it. You know, there are some weird songs out there, and there's a really weird song in here. Nevertheless, we're teaching through this Old Testament book of Habakkuk, and today we get to Habakkuk chapter 3. Habakkuk chapter 3, it's a song. It's a weird song with some rather confusing lyrics. Starts with this, Habakkuk 1, verse 3, a prayer of Habakkuk the prophet on Shigionoth. You say, well, what's on Shigionoth? What's that? Shigionoth is not the 5th Beatle, okay? There's some debate over what this is. Some people believe that it's a stringed instrument. Some people believe Shigionoth was a poetic, passionate song. The precise meaning of this word has gotten lost in history, but we do know this. It means that Habakkuk chapter 3 is a song. It's a musical term. It's a song. It's a weird song. Listen to this. Verse 4. Rees flashed from his hand. Where his power was hidden, plague went before him, pestilence followed his steps. What kind of song lyric is that? Do you know any songs that talk about that kind of thing? Well, maybe there's a couple of country music songs that do. You know, somebody's ex who did them wrong. Do you know Loretta Lynn? She actually sang a song entitled this, You Are the Reason Our Kids Are So Ugly. That's a real song. So is this one. Habakkuk chapter 3. What does this one mean? Why is it in the Bible? And what is God saying to us through it? We've got some work to do. Let's dig in. Begins in verse 2. His first verse is this. He says, Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. In wrath, remember mercy. See, Habakkuk, he knows what's coming. Wrath. God had already told him about that. Remember the book of Habakkuk, the big picture. This book is a conversation between Habakkuk and God. Habakkuk began this book saying, God, I see pain, I see evil, I see suffering. Where are you? What are you doing? God, what's your plan? And then God responded and said, well, I'm going to do something. I am going to empower the ruthless Babylonians. They're going to get everyone's attention. They're going to rough you up. That's my plan. And then Habakkuk responds, well, God, do you have a plan B? You ever been there? When things are happening in your life that you don't understand what God's doing. You know, a crisis of faith. I thought that God was good, but I'm not seeing that right now. Where I thought God would do this, but he didn't. Why? Does he know? Does he care? Is he indifferent? When life hurts and things aren't going the way you want them to go, what do you tend to do? When faced with a crisis of belief, a lot of people tend to bail out on God. Tend to say, God, I'm out. That is not what this guy Habakkuk does. Habakkuk, he does something different. Look at this, verse 2. He says, Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds. And don't get the wrong idea. Remember what was happening. Things weren't going well for Habakkuk. Habakkuk, when he said those words, when he wrote this song, he wasn't seeing the power of God in the present. Things were dark. Things weren't going the way he wanted them to go. And God had just said, hey, Habakkuk, by the way, there's more pain on the way. What's Habakkuk doing in chapter 3? He's not running away from God. He's not ignoring God. Rather, he's singing a song, and this song, of all the possible things that this song could be about in the midst of this hard, dark, challenging time, Habakkuk's song in chapter 3 is a song about God's faithfulness. He wasn't experiencing that, but he started singing about that. This next section in your Bible, it's Habakkuk, and what he's doing, he's taking a musical stroll down memory lane. Music is triggering his memories. Do you ever experience that? I do. You know, whenever I hear the band REO Speedwagon, I think about my first high school homecoming dance. Disaster, not a good memory. Or you ever have this with smells? You know, you smell something and it triggers some memories. I had this just a week or so ago. We were putting a roast into the crock pot and left it overnight. I woke up in the morning and for just the first few seconds, I thought I was at my grandma's house. It brought it right back. You're thinking, man, my grandma's house didn't smell like roast. It was more like mothballs. Well, you get the idea. Things happen that trigger our memories. Certain things, well, they trigger those thoughts in us. That's what's happening in Habakkuk chapter 3. Verse 3. God came from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. His glory covered the heavens, and his praise filled the earth. His splendor was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand where his power was hidden. Now remember, this isn't something that Habakkuk was experiencing in the present. He says, God came from Teman. He's remembering something in the past. The Holy One from Mount Paran. So we should ask, well, where is that? Where's Teman? Where's Mount Paran? Well, Teman is kind of a Hebrew generic word that refers to the south. And the wilderness of Paran has another name. It's also called the Sinai Peninsula. Here's what this is. Here's what this first verse is. This is a lyrical reference to Mount Sinai. You know what happened on Mount Sinai? I mean, hundreds of years earlier, Habakkuk is remembering when the glory of the Lord was revealed on Mount Sinai. It's at Mount Sinai. That's where God gave the people the law. That's where God gave the people the 10 Commandments. And God, he didn't do that to restrict them. He did that to bless them. God, he's the one who made and designed this world. He knows how it works. He knows what causes pain, and he knows what causes wounds, and he knows what causes hurt, and he loves us, and he doesn't want that for us. So he gives us this book. He gives us the Bible to show us how we can navigate life in a fallen world, to give us wisdom beyond our years. He wants to inform us and protect us and bless us. Habakkuk, he's saying, well, God's the one who gave us this. Mount Sinai, God's the one who gave us the law. God did that. God, He's faithful. Next verse. Verse 5 says, plagues went before him, pestilence followed his steps. Plagues and pestilence in the Bible. Anybody recognize this? This is a reference to Egypt. The people of Israel, they were slaves in Egypt for 400 years. How did they get out? Did they revolt? Did they form an army and Chuck Norris their way out of there? No. This story is found in the first few books of the Bible. It's the Exodus. God is the one who fought the battle for them. The Exodus, the plagues, the Passover, God did that. Habakkuk is singing this song and he's remembering, well, God, even though I'm not experiencing it right now, God, my God, He is faithful. Let's keep going. Verse 6, he stood and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. He looked and made the nations tremble. You know who else has a look like that? My wife. You might be thinking, if you know her, well, Sarah, isn't she nice and kind and sweet? She is, but she's also got a look. I'm telling you, sometimes she doesn't even have to say a word. Husbands, you know this look that I'm talking about? Pretty good chance I'm going to see this look shortly after this service, right? Well, God's got to look like that. That's what Habakkuk's singing about. He says, he stood and the earth shook. He looked and made the nations tremble. Here's what he's referring to. Do you remember Jericho? Story in the Old Testament. Jericho, big city, massive wall. Do you recall how many warriors Israel had for this battle? None. Weapons. Did they have weapons? Do trumpets count? That's what they had. General Joshua's plan was to march around this city, to blow the trumpets, and then to leave. And then to come back and do the same thing the next day, and the next day, and the next day. If I were in that strategy session, I'll tell you what I'd have done. I said, Joshua, I love your faith, but let's talk about that plan. Might I be able to interest you in a catapult? That could help. Or how about a battering ram? At the very minimum, Joshua, at least bring along a few ladders. He didn't do that. Joshua, he stuck with trumpets. What happened? Well, here's what happened. On the seventh day, those walls came a-tumbling down. Habakkuk's point, Habakkuk is remembering, and he's saying, we didn't do that. We're not the ones who took those walls down. God did. Even if we aren't feeling it right now in this moment, our God, He is faithful. Verse 8. Were you angry with the rivers, Lord? Was your wrath against the streams? Did you rage against the sea when you rode your horses and your chariots to victory? Recognize this one? After they left Egypt, Moses led them directly into Box Canyon. Not brilliant. To the north, there was a massive Egyptian military fortress. To the south, the blazing desert. To the east, the Egyptian army that was on a mission to get their runaway slaves back. And to the west, the Red Sea. They were trapped. What did they do? Well, Exodus tells us a story. Chapter 14, verse 13. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Did you catch what their role was? People had a pretty easy job. What did they do? Stood, waited, watched. You be still. That's it. That's all. And God, he declared, stand back, people. This battle, this one's mine. And God, he parted the Red Sea during the night. And the people, they walked to freedom on dry ground. God did that. When they were trapped, when it looked like there was no way out, God provided a way out. God, he parted the Red Sea. God did that. And Habakkuk, he's remembering that, and he's singing, God did that. Our God, he really is. He's faithful. Habakkuk chapter 3. Are you understanding this now? Because it's really helpful to recognize that this chapter, it's a song. And it's a song with some rather antiquated language. Reminds me of another old song. This is Isaac Watts. He wrote a few of the most beloved hymns. You've probably heard a few of them. Joy to the World. Isaac Watts, he wrote that. When I Surveyed the Wondrous Cross, Isaac Watts, he wrote that. Well, he wrote another song that's not quite as popular. That song is this one. Blessed is the man whose bowels move. Could you imagine singing that song in church? It's like, hey, blessed is the man whose bowels move. Jake, can we get that one on our playlist? That one didn't go over as big. So a weird song. Just a couple more verses left in this song of Habakkuk in chapter 3, verse 9. He says, you split the earth with rivers. The mountains saw you and writhed. Torrents of water swept by. The deep roared and lifted its waves on high. Habakkuk, he's remembering, the crossing of the Jordan River here. The promised land, it was on the other side of the Jordan River, and in those days they didn't have a bridge and they didn't have a ferry service, so this river served as a pretty major barrier. God, he told the priests who were carrying the ark, he said, put your feet in the river. They did. What happened? The river parts, and they walk into the land of promise on dry ground. The point, Habakkuk is remembering, the people didn't do that. We don't have that capacity. We don't have that kind of power. Who did that? He's saying, God did that. God, he is faithful. Last stanza for today, verse 11. Sun and moon stood still in the heavens at the glint of your flying arrows, at the lightning of your flashing spear. That's a reference to Joshua chapter 10. Israel was in a battle. They were facing an army comprised of 5 enemy nations. Somehow they managed to gain the upper hand, but night was falling, and night meant reorganizing and regrouping for their enemy. Time was critical, so Joshua, he asked God for this. Joshua 10, verse 12. Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped. Who can do that? Habakkuk, he's remembering, we can't do that. We don't have that kind of power. The people didn't do that. God did that. Our God, he is faithful. If you were to write this song, what verses would you add? I think I'd add a verse on public speaking. I almost didn't become a pastor because I was terrified of doing this, standing in front of people. It's kind of a liability for a pastor. Let me tell you something that happened. The first time that I did this, the first time I gave a sermon I was in college at the time, and I remember I was so nervous, really, really nervous. And as the first song, the opening worship started, I actually had to leave the worship center. You want to know why? I had to go find a bathroom. Major bowel blast. Was that an overshare? Yeah. Well, Isaac Watts wouldn't think so, right? He wrote a song about that. I think I'd write another verse about being single. You know, when I first met Sarah, I was living in Michigan. She was living in Texas. The circumstances that brought our lives together, man, only God. I'd include a verse about starting this church. This church began 25 years ago with a handful of people meeting in a living room studying the Bible. The point's this. I can look back at the history in my own life and realize I didn't do those things. There are events and things that have transpired in my life that, not me, God did. God did that. God, He is faithful. Habakkuk chapter 3. Remember, Habakkuk, he's writing this song about God's faithfulness, but remember, when he was writing it, he wasn't experiencing that. His life was difficult. And then he also was told by God, hey, more bad news. The Babylonians, they're coming. What do you do when your life is like that? It's so easy to get consumed by the problems of the present. You know, we have deadlines and responsibilities and pain and relationship and challenges that give us stress. And these things, here's what they do. They fill our hearts and they fill our minds. They consume us. And if we're not careful, they can cause us to forget. We can forget about our Mount Sinai's. We can forget about our Jerichos. We can forget about our Red Seas. We can forget all about God's faithfulness to us last year. We can forget all about God's faithfulness to us last month. We can forget all about God's faithfulness to us last week. We can forget about God's provisions in the past. We can get so focused on the issues of today that we overlook the miracles of yesterday. Why is this chapter in the Bible? I think it's in the Bible because God knows. God knows if we pause and we look at our past, that can change our future. God's faithfulness, it's not limited to just ancient stories in this book. God's faithfulness is visible. It's visible in our lives. God's faithfulness isn't just for some other people. God's faithfulness, that's for us. So here's how we're going to close. Let's close by composing our own song. And if you're not musical, don't worry. You don't have to ever sing it. I just want us to think about it. So go ahead and close your eyes, and we'll have a time where we compose our own song, where we just reflect on God in our own life. I invite you into this space to recall to your mind the ways that God has been faithful, not just in the Bible, not just in pages of history, but that God has been faithful to you in your life. Think about a time, or maybe more than one time, when you experienced God's provision in a moment of crisis. And now think about and just name a specific time when you experienced God's grace in a moment when you didn't deserve it. And bring to your mind a time when you experience God's comfort, when you experience God's peace. even when you were facing pain. And think of a time in your life when you experienced guidance from God, when you were facing a decision. Lord, the song of our life has many verses, but it's just got one chorus. You are faithful. You are faithful to us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. On this Thanksgiving weekend, we are thankful not just in a general sense, and we are thankful not in a generic sense. We are thankful to you. Lord, we acknowledge in this space, in this moment, we're thankful to you. You are the source of our thankfulness. You are the source of our provision. And so in this time, we say thank you for your faithfulness. These specific times that come to our mind, thank you for your provision. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for your love. We are grateful. We give you our thankfulness. We give you our worship. We give you our praise. Stand with me and let's do that together.